I've lived most of my life way out in the valley countryside of Ontario. Given, that's not a whole lot for an 18-year-old, but for me, it's the only place I can call home, and I like to think that I know the entire area, as far and sprawling as it is, like the back of my hand. Adventures across the long, cross-crossing roads, pastures, and woods that made up the skeleton of my village were a common venture in my childhood. As a young kid, I had a habit of biking extremely far out in hopes of finding new places. And sometimes, my dad or one of my friends' parents would toss our bikes in their pickup and take us way out onto a back road and let us explore for a few hours. This was how a lot of us first found that on one of these crappy gravel roads surrounded by thin woods was a worn down old shack sitting just about 20 meters off of the path. Honestly, I never thought anything of it, except for the fact that it was creepy. It had no windows to see inside, and I never went anywhere near it, but one of my friends at the time said that her older sister had tried to go in, and that the door was always locked. We all had better things to be curious about at the time than that anyway, so I quickly moved on, and it became nothing more than a mundane landmark of that area. Honestly, I'd completely forgotten about it for a few years now, except last Tuesday. I was coming home from one of my very late classes at my university, and I usually take the back roads I perused many years ago, as they're more straightforward and scarcely ever have any sort of traffic. As I drove down the gravel path that would wind along the side of the country and eventually take me to the next street I needed to turn onto, I noticed a faint glinting coming from within the trees up ahead, maybe about 100 meters from my car. A flashlight? I thought, but as my car came closer, I realized what I was really seeing. The light inside of the shack was on. I should mention now that in all the nearly 13 years I spent living in the area, I've never seen the door open, and I've never seen a light on inside of that shack ever, not even once. I must have driven past that shack probably almost 100 times in my life, but this was the first time I'd ever seen any sign of a person's presence having been anywhere near that thing. That, coupled with the fact that it was 10 o'clock at night and pitch black outside aside from my own headlights, and the faint, incandescent glow lighting up the doorframe up ahead, immediately filled me with what I can only describe as a weird sense of dread. It would be hard for most people not to be immediately unsettled by something like that, and I am someone who's easily spooked. Fortunately, while my car approached the light, I was curious enough that despite the feeling in my stomach, I slowed down as I was about to pass, hoping that I could see what was going on inside. And this is probably the only reason I managed to spot the dark shape that burst out the foliage on the side of the road directly into my path. I wasn't going very fast at that point, but I still pounded the brakes rather hard in alarm so my car came to a crunching stop on the gravel. For a moment, I was just really confused and freaked out. What was that? Had I almost hit a deer or something? This far out in the country, a deer would have been the most likely and most reasonable assumption. But in the beams of my car, I could see what had stopped me. A very tall, very lanky old man with scraggly and balding grey hair. Right away I got the impression that this man was very poor. He looked dirty and unkempt, and his clothes hung off of him. However, I'm generally used to seeing people who aren't that well off in my town, and I don't like to judge people right away based off of that sort of thing. So I was mostly just extremely unsettled over what the hell this guy was doing way out here, and why he had to walk out in front of my car. As I sat there confused, the old man came around to my window and knocked on the glass, feeling my memories of stranger danger conversations with my parents kicking in. As old as those conversations were, I rolled down the window, just a crack, only enough for someone to be able to hear me and for me to hear them. I was already creeped out enough as it was. Immediately, I had to say what I was thinking. What are you doing out here? I asked. In my peripheral vision, I could still see the light from the shack, but in my mind's eye, I wasn't really registering it anymore. Stupid, I know. I should have made the connection immediately, but I was still kind of shaken by the fact that I could have run this guy over if I hadn't been able to stop in time, and being a new driver and all the thought of that was terrifying. After a small pause, the man started talking to me. He had a thick, croaky sort of voice, and he spoke very slowly.
My truck, it's broken,
he explained. I was also getting the feeling that he wasn't really all there mentally. I didn't have to look around to notice there wasn't any truck on the side of the road, but I did anyway, turning my head around to confirm what I already knew. There was definitely no truck. Had he somehow driven it into the trees or something? As far as I could remember and see, there wasn't enough space anywhere in them for a truck to fit through. What was the man talking about? Whilst I was looking, it was honestly as though I could feel that he was watching me. And when I turned back, he was still leaning down to peer inside of my window at me.
Where? I don't see it.
I blurted. I was definitely distrustful of this guy already. At first, he didn't respond, and my nerves were only getting worse the longer we were alone out there. Then he replied,
It's just up the road.
he said, turning just to point with his finger in that general direction. The lights on my car aren't exactly the greatest, but I could still see far enough that I really couldn't imagine where on earth this truck was supposed to be. I couldn't spot the faintest sight of it. While I squinted up ahead, he continued,
I'll show you where if you come.
At this point, I really had no idea what this old man was thinking I could do to help. I'm 18 years old, female, and very petite. I don't exactly look like the type of person who knows a lot about cars or how to fix them, and for the record, I'm really not. But I was tired from a long day at school, so I absolutely was not at my brightest, and for some reason, part of me felt guilty about leaving him out there alone if his truck was really broken.
Okay,
I said, and I reached for my gear shift to start driving slowly up the road. But as soon as he saw my hand, he shook his head.
just walk, it's not too far.
What? Excuse me, but no thanks. How the hell was I going to see anything in the dark if I got out of my car and followed him anyway? There was no harm in driving wherever he was trying to lead me. The more I talked to the guy, the more unnerved I was getting, and the more red flags were starting to pop in my mind. I couldn't see a car anywhere, and this total stranger wanted me to get out of mine and follow him into the dark on this creepy road in the middle of nowhere. I will admit, I am a bit of a naive person, but I'm definitely not that stupid.
No, I'd rather drive to it.
I responded. This situation really wasn't making any sense to me. I could see his brow furrow and he looked kind of agitated. He insisted,
Your car won't fit in the trees anyway.
So did his truck crash then? Why the trees if we were going up the road? I remembered what I'd just been thinking a minute earlier, about there not being enough space, and I asked him.
Then how did yours get in the trees?
The only logical explanation would have been that his truck had swerved off the road. But even if that were the case, there was seriously nothing at all that I could have done to help him fix his car or get it back out again. It genuinely made no sense at all to be asking me to come with him and help, and the entire situation was beginning to make me very scared. There was a lengthy enough pause between my question and him speaking up that I was beginning to think he didn't hear me or something. So I asked again. Still no immediate answer. When he finally did reply, he was staring at me directly in the eyes. I think I'm going to have nightmares about it for a long time. It was so sudden, and the way he said it was just so unbelievably creepy.
You don't look old enough to drive.
I hear comments like this a lot since I do look very young because of my size. Normally, somebody would say this with a smile or something to signify that this is in fact meant to be taken as a joke. But the guy's face didn't change even slightly. He just kept staring at me with a completely cold expression. The sheer inappropriateness of such a remark in that kind of situation immediately had my heart racing. And all I could think was, what did this guy want with me? What I wanted to say next was, who the fuck are you? But instead, I anxiously fumbled for my phone in my pocket, babbling in a way that probably made it really obvious I was completely freaked out of my mind.
Okay, I can just call someone to come help you out. There's not really anything I can do.
As I said that, it occurred to me to wonder, did this old guy not have a cell phone of his own? I know not every older person has one, even if they're becoming much more common. Then I also remembered, with a sudden streak of massive fear, the shack with the light on. I could still see the light coming from it, just up ahead in the trees. My dumb brain finally put two and two together. The old man hadn't even mentioned it at all. It was like it wasn't even there to him, and there was definitely no one out there that could have turned the light on. But the guy who was standing outside my car right now, what was he doing out here in that shack, which had been locked for all these years by someone I never knew? There was definitely no truck around here. He wanted me out of my car for another reason. I think maybe the old man must have seen on my face that I was scared out of my wits and about to book it out of there. Instead of any words, without warning, his face contorted with rage and he swung his fist, pounding it against my window with enough strength to make it shudder. His eyes were wide and he looked furious and completely insane. Even though I was panicking more than I ever had in my life, and I was sure he was about to smash the window in if he tried again, I screamed, threw my phone onto the floor, switched gears, and slammed my foot down on the gas pedal. I hurtled down the road, and when I glanced into my rearview mirror, I saw his dark shape turn from standing in the road, and I watched as he turned and he walked off the road, directly back towards the light of the shack. I didn't slow down at all until I was nearly home, and absolutely sure that there was no way that he could have followed me. When I got home that night, I spent a long time crying about what had happened with my mum. And though I don't think she believed all of what I told her, we don't have the greatest relationship. She called up everyone she knew to ask if anyone knew the old man, or if they knew who owned that shack. In a town like ours, just about everyone knows each other, but no one had any clue who he was. One of our family friends even swore that he was sure it's been abandoned for at least 4 years now. And since most people don't usually take that road, no one said that they'd ever seen a light on or the door open but me. I've been taking a different route home from school since, and I really don't think I ever want to head back down that road.